Hey there. Tonight we're going far back, not to palaces or marble temples, but to a time of gods, monsters and mortals who wandered through a world shaped by fate and fire. You'll drift through the entire arc of Greek mythology, from the first breath of chaos to the rise of Olympus to the quiet echo of myths that still shape our world today. You'll meet heroes who bled for glory, lovers who defied the gods, and beings born from sea foam, thunder, and stubbornness. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it actually brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there falling asleep to the same old stories. So, dim the lights, let the gods whisper, let the myths unfold. And let's begin. Story 1. The daughter of spring, settle into the hush of evening and breathe as the air cools against your skin. Picture a room that remembers the sea, a clay lamp resting on a windowsill, and the last color of day stretched along the horizon of honeyed light. In that quiet, our story opens beside the Aegean. Boats return to harbor with the soft clap of ropes, and gulls write letters across the sky that fold into dusk. You listen, and the city falls back. This is the hour when old songs step forward, and the air seems to lean closer, ready to hear. The first voice belongs to Demeter, because nights that ask for gentleness begin with a promise that life will return. In the sacred stories of Greece, Demeter is the patient heart of fields and bread. Her daughter, Persephone, is a spring blossom that learns the weight of seasons. The myth is simple and deep. Hades carries Persephone below the earth, and the world forgets how to be green. Demeter searches across roads and shorelines, pauses at wells and doorways, and the ground holds its seed in silence until she is answered. Ancient singers set the hearth of this tale at Eleusis, where a secret rite grew like a guarded garden for nearly 2,000 years. The mysteries promised comfort in the face of loss and a bright hope after death, and they were famed not because everyone understood them, but because initiates were bound to silence. Even today, we can only trace the outline of what they experienced, guided by the myth of Demeter and Persephone that stood at the center of the rites and gave shape to their compassion. The connection between the Eleusinian rites and the Demeter story is recorded in ancient summaries and survives in careful scholarship. In the hymn that bears Demeter's name, a queen in Eleusis receives the wandering goddess without recognizing her. The goddess, veiled like a traveler, asks for a simple drink. It is called kykeon, a mixture stirred together like homespun comfort, and that small cup belongs to the ritual memory of the place. It is ordinary and sacred at once. Imagine the taste, cool and grainy, carrying the calm of fields into the body. If you are willing, walk with me into the night roads. We follow a path once taken from Athens to Eleusis, the sacred way. Picture moonlight on the stones and a quiet chorus of sandals. The air smells of olive and thyme. Farmers have left their tools leaning against walls, and somewhere a lyre offers a casual melody to the silence. There were seasons when this road brightened with processions and laughter, and other seasons when it held grief, like a folded letter in a pocket. Both moods are welcome. Both teach us that the path to meaning holds joy and sorrow together. The poets who kept these stories set their roots in older soil. Hesiod sang of the birth of the gods, of titans and their long shadow, of the bright assembly on Olympus. He recited names that became familiar prayers, and genealogies bloomed like vines, so the world arranged itself with an order that felt almost domestic. The hearth, the sea, the sky, the memory of mothers, the law of the city, the pride of mountains, and the stories of rivers stood in their places. You do not need to memorize each lineage to feel the pattern. It is enough to know that a memory of order shelters the human heart. Hold that idea while the sea works in the distance. Persephone's absence is not a single loss. It is winter itself. Demeter sits beside empty furrows and lets the cold pass through her. She refuses the harvest, and humanity stands on the edge of hunger until the truth is found. A compromise is made. For part of the year, Persephone returns. The fields lift their heads, and everything that sleeps remembers the path back to the sun. This movement is slow and clear, like folding blankets after a long storm, and in that rhythm your breath begins to settle. Now lean a little closer to the shoreline. The surf in your thoughts continues its careful work. Each wave draws a line and wipes it gently. The lamp flame flickers and steadies. I will tell you a quiet rumor that once moved along these coasts. Far south, a mountain shattered on an island called Thera. Ash rose into the sky and drifted across water, touching distant shores. In later years, some said the disaster helped unweave older ways of life, and scholars still debate the date and the reach of the ash across the sea, which shows how the past can remain partly veiled. Return to the room for a moment. Notice the weight of blankets and the soft geography of pillows. Outside, the city moves like a sleeping animal. Light pools on the floor, then thins. As you settle, think of Demeter stepping through kitchens that smell of bread and smoke. Think of Persephone returning with the first stems of green, carried like delicate spears in both hands. The mysteries asked only that people arrive with sincerity. No one can say exactly what they saw. It was enough that they felt company in the face of loss, and that the year became a circle instead of a cliff. Tonight, you are an initiate of quiet. You hold a simple cup, and the rim touches your lip with a whisper of grain and water. Certainty is not required, only attention and breath. Listen to the plain courage of fields. A seed asks to be buried first. Darkness is not a punishment. It is a chamber where roots decide their direction. Persephone shows the way back. Demeter keeps the lamp near the door. Somewhere between them, a path is drawn for you as well. From waking to sleep, from worry to a workable peace. You are safe here now. Story 2. The loom of the fates. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It is spun in careful threads, and in Greece the weavers were known by name. The Moirai, the fates, carried a spindle that wound the story of each person. Clotho spun the thread, Lachesis measured its span, and Atropos cut it with calm precision. No one escaped their work, not even the gods who held thunder in their hands. The whisper of their presence softened ambition and reminded mortals that each choice unfolded inside a larger pattern. Imagine them by lamplight, their fingers steady, the thread shimmering with a quiet glow. The spindle turns and a hum fills the air like the sound of bees in a meadow. Some say their home stood at the edge of night, others that they visited each cradle to leave their design. Their rhythm is slow, deliberate, and in its steadiness you may find your own breath keeping time, as though you too are wrapped in the cloth of their work. Greek poets return to the image of weaving again and again. Penelope, the queen who waited 20 years for Odysseus, wove her own delay on a loom by day and unraveled it by night. The action became a prayer for time, a way to hold off the pressing hands of suitors until her husband returned. The loom was not only a tool of fabric, but of patience, and women across villages must have recognized the gesture in their own lives. Turning thread into blankets and blankets into shelter, the Greeks compared poetry to weaving as well, a loom of words that held memory together. If you look carefully at painted vases, you may find Persephone and Demeter there too, their robes patterned like woven fields. Pottery served as memory, a way to carry story into banquet halls and homes, and fragments unearthed in soil today continue to speak. The details are small. A sprig of wheat held between fingers, a pomegranate cut open to reveal its jeweled seeds. These images echo the larger hymn and remind us that the ancient world lived with myth not only in festivals, but in the daily act of lifting a cup or pouring oil. Archaeologists trace motifs across centuries, finding how shapes traveled and shifted, proof that memory itself behaves like thread passed from hand to hand. The fates did not frighten the Greeks as much as they steadied them. To know one's life had a span was to live with seriousness, but also with release. No mortal had to carry the weight of immortality. Joy could be taken in the fleeting nature of a meal, a song, or an embrace. This acceptance is part of why their stories still calm us. They teach that endings are not failures, but fulfillments of a pattern. Picture the city of Athens at night. Torches line the streets in a processional, flickering against marble and clay. Somewhere the Acropolis rises, a dark silhouette crowned by the Parthenon. Within, statues gleam in the glow of oil lamps, gold and ivory faces reflecting both pride and reverence. Below, families rest on pallets and mats, listening to traveling singers who tell of gods and heroes. The voices rise and fall like waves, and the words fold listeners into a larger weave. Sleep comes easily to those who know the world's story carries their own within it. Yet myths also held warnings. Hubris, pride that ignored the order of fate, was a danger feared by all. The tale of Niobe, who mocked Leto and boasted of her many children, ended in stillness when Apollo and Artemis struck her offspring down. Her grief hardened her into stone, and even today, travelers to Mount Sipylus in Turkey are told of a rock face that seems to weep when rain falls. Geologists explain the streams of water as natural springs, but the story of Niobe lives in the droplets, showing how myth and landscape interlace. The ancient Greeks accepted that the land itself could become part of the fabric of their stories. As your body sinks deeper into rest, consider how the loom of the fates reflects the rhythm of your own breath. Inhale, the thread is spun. Pause, the measure is taken. Exhale, the cloth lies finished for that moment. The pattern stretches forward and back beyond what you can see, but you need not grasp it all at once. Like Demeter searching patiently, like Penelope weaving and unweaving, your life is held in a design both tender and unhurried. The ancients looked to the stars for reassurance of this order. Constellations traced across the heavens told of heroes, punishments, and transformations. Orion the hunter, Perseus with his prize, Cassiopeia bound to her chair, all became fixed points by which sailors steered their journeys. The night sky was not random, but arranged into stories that returned season after season. Just as Persephone returned, just as Demeter endured, the constellations confirmed that nothing was lost, only transformed into a different kind of light. The fates themselves were sometimes imagined as stars, their spindle gleaming in the firmament. Astronomers in Alexandria, centuries later, mapped the heavens with careful mathematics, but even they could not erase the older stories that gave the sky its voice. Myth and measurement lived together, not in conflict, but in dialogue. One offered meaning, the other precision, and between them, humanity walked beneath the night more steadily. Now, as you drift further, imagine lying beneath that same ancient sky. The air is cool, olive branches rustle lightly. A torch burns low and then goes out, leaving the Milky Way spread across the heavens like a river of spilled grain. In that wide silence, the loom continues its work. Each star is a knot, each breath a thread, and you are part of the fabric, resting, luminous, unbroken. Story 3, The Song of Orpheus. The loom of the fates hums quietly in the background of all stories, but some threads shine brighter because of music. Tonight, we follow the sound of a lyre across the hills of Thrace, where Orpheus was said to have been born. His gift was not only melody, but persuasion. Rivers slowed their course when he played, stones softened, and animals circled close, as if they were listening to a remembered voice. His music was the gentlest authority, and for that reason it entered the deepest parts of the Greek imagination. The story most often told is one of love and loss. Orpheus wed Eurydice, a nymph of delicate grace, but she was bitten by a serpent soon after the marriage. Her spirit slipped into the underworld before the promise of their life together could ripen. Orpheus, unwilling to surrender, traveled down into the shadows. His lyre spoke where words could not. Even Hades and Persephone, stern guardians of that realm, paused at the music and agreed to release Eurydice on one condition. Orpheus must not look back until they reached the upper world. Imagine the long ascent through shadowed tunnels, a faint light far above, and the pressure of silence walking between them. Each step tested patience. Orpheus felt her presence like warmth behind him, but doubt whispered with every turn of the path. Near the threshold, overcome with longing, he glanced back, and in that instant she faded, pulled away forever. The story ends in grief, but it is grief wrapped in music, so even sorrow is softened by the beauty of his song. The Greeks told this tale not only to explain loss, but to offer a mirror of devotion. Orpheus did not conquer death, yet he carried love into its depths, and that memory comforted listeners who themselves faced loss. Some ancient cults, influenced by Orphic teachings, spoke of the soul as something that could journey through many lives, guided by purity and remembrance. Golden tablets discovered in graves across southern Italy, and Crete bear inscriptions with instructions for the dead, believed to be Orphic in origin. They whisper of wells, guardians, and a path to join the company of the blessed, showing that music and myth reached into ritual practice as well. In Athens, small groups gathered under the name of Orpheus, singing hymns that promised cleansing for the soul. They connected his music to a hope for release from cycles of suffering. Scholars today still debate the exact nature of Orphism, but the fragments left behind reveal a longing for immortality woven through song. What began as a myth of one man's grief spread into a philosophy of redemption. Let us pause by a hillside at dusk. The air is scented with pine and resin. A shepherd sets aside his staff and listens as someone plucks strings. The notes rise like swallows, quick and light, then fall with the softness of evening rain. Around him, sheep grow still, ears turning toward the sound. This was the power Orpheus embodied, and it is the power that echoes in our own listening hearts. Music reaches places that words alone cannot, loosening the knots of worry and easing the passage towards sleep. The myth also taught caution. Orpheus looked back too soon, undone by impatience. The lesson is not harsh, but tender. Trust the process, keep faith with the unseen, and do not let longing betray the journey. In the same way, when you close your eyes tonight, you step into a path without needing to look back. Sleep waits at the far end, steady and patient. You are guided by rhythms, the pulse of your breath, the gentle song of your heart, and you need not question whether you will arrive. In Roman times, poets like Virgil retold the story of Orpheus with equal care. The tale traveled through centuries, painted on frescoes in Pompeii, carved into sarcophagi, echoed in operas and paintings of later Europe. Its endurance shows how deeply people recognized themselves in the figure of one who could charm the world, yet still falter at the edge of fulfillment. The myth's humanity is what made it eternal. Even the land remembers. In Thrace, where Orpheus was said to wander, there are caves that carry his name. Some scholars suggest that rituals may have been held within them, where echoes turned simple song into something unearthly. Imagine the sound of a lyre inside stone chambers, notes multiplying against the walls, wrapping listeners in a net of music. In such places, myth and geography joined, and participants might have felt they were indeed standing at the threshold between worlds. The myth ends with Orpheus himself meeting death, torn by Maenads in a frenzy. Yet even then, his head, still singing, floated down the river Hebrus, and the lyre was lifted to the stars as a constellation. This transformation softened the tragedy. What is broken in the earth is preserved in the sky. Each time the constellation Lyra appears shimmering above, it recalls not only the sorrow of loss, but the persistence of beauty. Rest here in that thought. The world may cut and fray, but song remains. The Greeks understood this, which is why they placed music at the heart of education and ritual. They believed melody could shape character, soothe rage, and teach harmony. Pythagoras even imagined the planets themselves moving in mathematical music, a harmony of the spheres beyond hearing but always present. To close your eyes is to enter that harmony, to let your breath join the larger rhythm. The tale of Orpheus reminds us that even the deepest grief can be carried by beauty. In listening, you are not alone. You are part of a chorus of centuries, each heart leaning toward music in search of comfort. As you rest now, picture the lyre lifted high in the night, its strings glowing like silver threads across the dark. The song continues, soft, endless, drawing you gently downward into sleep. Story 4, Daedalus and the First Flight. The last of Orpheus' notes fades into the sea wind, and we drift south to Crete, where sunlit courtyards breathe in rhythm with the surf. In a palace of red columns and painted light, corridors turn upon themselves like careful thoughts, and stairs rise toward wells of sky. Here, in the court of King Minos, the most prized companion is not a warrior, but a maker. Daedalus moves through workshops bright with copper and lime wash, teaching wood to curve like silk and stone, to balance as if it were light. The island hums with invention, and the walls themselves seem eager to learn. The paintings remember bulls. Dolphins glide in bands of blue, lilies climb in patterned ranks, and across a famous panel a youth vaults a charging animal with calm precision, hands finding horn and back and air in a single flowing sentence. Whether the leap was sport-right or both, the vision still glows on plaster, its colors reawakened by careful hands. A century ago, when Sir Arthur Evans raised Knossos from the dust and pieced the palace into a living argument of art and archaeology. Whatever scholars debate about restoration, the image of the leaper remains. The human body poised above force, as if grace could teach strength a gentler answer. The very word labyrinth opens like an old door. Evans linked it to the double axe, the labries, whose sign repeats in the ruins, and imagined the palace as the house of the double axes. Others point instead to Cretan coins engraved with a single path maze, a curling design that offers no choices at all, only a steady inward turn and a sure way out again. The emblem suggests that getting lost is not always the lesson. Sometimes the pattern asks only for patience and the courage to keep walking. Whether the name belongs to axes or to paths, Crete stamped the labyrinth on the memory of Greece as surely as it stamped it on bronze. Yet beneath the painted order lay a secret with hooves. In older tellings, when Minos failed a god and pride ripened into shame, desire answered in a shape that was neither man nor bull. The queen turned to Daedalus, who made a device of wood and hide that concealed her within a fabricated body and set the course of sorrow. From that union a child grew who could not be welcomed into any hall. Minos commanded Daedalus to build a place that might contain the problem he could not solve. So the craftsman drew a net in stone, where passages repeated and sightlines closed, and where even confidence learned to hesitate. The Minotaur was kept within, and Daedalus, whose hands had created the maze, learned how easily a patron can become a jailer. There is a limit to how long a maker accepts a locked door. Daedalus watched the harbors count oars, and the ships count sailors. Guards knew his face. The sea fenced the island with bright, obedient law. So he turned to the one road a king could not close. Ovid sets the scene on a headland, where the craftsman gathers feathers, graduating them from small to large like notes arranged for a scale. He lashes quills with thread, seals seams with wax, and fits a pair to his own shoulders before shaping another to his son's. He gives the lesson that every parent wishes would be enough. Keep to the middle air, not too high, where heat softens the work of careful hands, and not too low, where spray will drag you down. Then he rises, and the boy rises after, and Crete begins to shrink like a memory that is finally safe to keep. Imagine the morning they depart. Fishermen squint upward, palms lifted against the white of the sun. The light falls clean along the sea, and the sea answers with small mirrors. Wingbeat by wingbeat, they cross a furrowless field. The labyrinth becomes a coin you could press into wax. The castles in air become corridors of wind. The father holds a lane of steady air and gestures to it with his body, in the language that children know best. The boy feels joy opening like a sail and tests the space that joy makes. He rises a little, then a little more, truing himself against the warmth that the sky holds above the safe band of blue. The lesson holds until joy proves larger than advice. Heat loosens the tidy work at the seams. A feather lifts and wavers. Another drifts astern like a white leaf. The bindings soften to threads, and the sky that seemed a road becomes a margin. In older verses, the father calls his son's name again and again, a line thrown into a place no line can hold. A brief, bright splash follows, rings opening like stunned eyes, then stillness, and in that stillness, a new name settles upon the water. Sailors later call this stretch the Icarian Sea, and the long island near it takes a kindred name. On its shores, people point to places where memory says the body came to land, and a summer theatre still faces the horizon that first morning held. Toponyms keep grief from scattering. A map becomes a soft altar, and wind, rock, and sun agree to remember with you. Daedalus, who survives what he could not prevent, lets motion become medicine. He flies on and comes down among Sicilian hills at the court of Cocalus, where craft is welcome and sorrow may speak without being hurried. Minos follows with a hunter's patience and a riddle in his hand. He carries a spiral shell and promises gold to anyone who can pass a thread through its coils, thinking that the mind that solved the labyrinth will answer this as well. The trick, say the storytellers, lies not in force, but in small, faithful labor. Tie the thread to an ant, tempt it with honey at the narrow throat, and let patience do what pride cannot. When the line emerges, Minos has his proof. When he reaches for the man he wants, house and hearth rise to protect their guest. And the king who caged a maker finds that not every bath is meant for comfort. Return a moment to Knossos and walk the terraces with unhurried steps. Whatever the literal truth of a maze, the place itself teaches how lightly guidance can be given. Corridors offset, so sight is slowed. Stairs climb toward rooms where light falls like water and air descends in cool sheets. The leper still arcs above the bull. The double axe still waits in stone. Scholars keep arguing which is a way of loving a thing without bending it to one certainty. In such rooms, you can feel how a story grows from walls as much as from words, and how a city can be an instrument that plays the human body into calm. Now carry only what steadies you. Wings are not required for rest. Think of reed and feather in a quiet hand, of wax warmed just enough to hold, of thread that knows how to keep a line. The lesson is not a scold, it is a measured kindness. Fly if you must, but remember water and light. Dream and keep the cord. The same thread that will one day guide a young hero through stone corridors can guide your breath through the turns of thought. Choose the middle air, the one that neither scorches nor drags. Let the sea breathe for you. Let the stars keep height so you do not have to. Close your eyes, you are already where you need to be. Story 5. The labors of Heracles beyond music and the soft persuasion of Orpheus, Greece also carried tales of strength and endurance. When listeners gathered by firelight or beneath temple colonnades, one name carried a weight that felt both reassuring and daunting: Heracles. Known to the Romans as Hercules, he was the son of Zeus and Alcmene, a mortal woman of noble line. His birth was tangled in divine jealousy, for Hera, wife of Zeus, raged against him from the first breath. Yet the boy grew immense in stature, with shoulders broad enough to carry the burdens of gods and men alike. The myth of Heracles unfolds through struggle. Where Orpheus offered song, Heracles offered sweat. His story is remembered most clearly through the 12 labors imposed upon him, a punishment and a redemption, a trial that stretched across the known world. These labors were told in countless variations, but their rhythm was consistent. Tasks impossible for ordinary men, performed with determination and cunning. They became lessons about perseverance and the human capacity to endure. The first labor sent him to slay the Nemean lion, a beast with hide no weapon could pierce. Imagine the silence of a forest where villagers no longer dared to walk. The lion moved like a shadow, invulnerable to bronze or iron. Heracles, unable to strike through its skin, wrestled it with his bare hands. His arms closed like a vice, and in the long struggle, he squeezed the life from the creature. When he returned, he wore its pelt as armor, the head draped over his own, eyes still glinting with defiance. That lion's hide became his most familiar cloak, a symbol of victory against the invincible. Next came the Hydra of Lerna, a serpent with many heads, each regrowing when cut. Heracles faced it with fire, cauterizing each neck after striking. The swamp where it lived stank with decay. Frogs croaked warnings, and mist clung to reeds. As heads hissed and snapped, Heracles' sword flashed. Only with the help of his nephew Iolaus, who wielded a burning torch, could the creature be subdued. Beneath one immortal head he buried a stone, and its venom would later coat his arrows, turning them into weapons of dreadful power. The labors continued. The capture of the Serenian hind, sacred to Artemis, the Erymanthian boar, driven into deep snow before being bound, the Augean stables whose filth Heracles cleansed by diverting rivers. These tasks stretched across landscapes that listeners could imagine, the Arcadian forests, the rivers of Elis, the mountain passes of Thessaly. In telling them, the Greeks connected their geography with courage. Every valley, every shoreline might hide a test of strength. Pause here and notice how your own breath mirrors the rhythm of exertion. Inhale with the gathering of strength. Exhale with the release of effort. The myth of Heracles is not only about feats of power, but about the steady endurance that allows any human to carry burdens through long days. His story was soothing in its scale. If such monsters could be faced, then ordinary struggles, plowing fields, raising children, enduring illness, could also be met with courage. One of his more gentle tasks was to capture the Cretan bull, which thundered across fields like a storm. Heracles seized it by the horns and tamed its fury, a reminder that strength could also guide rather than destroy. Another labor demanded the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded at the edge of the world. To achieve this, Heracles bargained with Atlas, the Titan who bore the sky on his shoulders. For a brief moment, Heracles himself held the heavens aloft, the weight pressing down upon him like a mountain of stars. The image of a man carrying the cosmos became one of the most enduring in Greek art and imagination. His final labor was the descent into Hades to bring back Cerberus, the three-headed hound who guarded the dead. Unarmed, Heracles wrestled the beast into submission and led it trembling into the light. This mirrored Orpheus's descent, but unlike the musician, Heracles returned triumphant, proving that even the underworld's threshold could not deny him. It was a story told not simply to glorify, but to reassure that courage could face even death itself. The ancients carved these scenes on temples and painted them on vases. The metopes of the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, for instance, depicted the labors in sequence, so that pilgrims could walk among stone reminders of endurance. Even today, fragments of these carvings remain, their lines softened by centuries, yet still whispering of strength made sacred. Yet Heracles was not simply a figure of victory. His life was marked by tragedy and temper. Hera's wrath drove him into fits of madness, and in one of those moments, he killed his own wife and children. The labors were both punishment and cleansing, a path toward balance after unbearable loss. This duality made him human despite his divine blood. He was not perfect. He was tested, scarred, and humbled, just as listeners were in their own lives. The myths say that after his mortal trials, Heracles burned upon a funeral pyre, the flames consuming his body. From that fire, he ascended to Olympus, reconciled even with Hera, and gained immortality among the gods. It was a promise that endurance leads to transformation, that even the harshest struggles may open into peace. As you rest now, let the labors of Heracles become gentle images. A lion subdued, its pelt warm across your shoulders. A serpent's heads falling silent one by one. Rivers rushing through stables, washing away what was foul. A sky held briefly in your arms, the stars pressing but not breaking you. These images are not burdens, but comforts, showing that each trial, no matter how heavy, can be borne and set down. The night grows quieter. The loom of the fates hums in the distance, but tonight it hums alongside the echo of Heracles' footsteps. You walk not in shadow, but in steady strength, each breath a labor completed, each exhale a victory. Sleep draws near like a soft cloak, and you too wear the calm of triumph. Story 6. Theseus and the Labyrinth. The fires of Heracles fade into embers, and now we step into another path, one lined with stone corridors and shadows that bend. This is the story of Theseus, the hero of Athens, whose name became tied forever to a maze and a monster. Where Heracles embodied endurance, Theseus carried the qualities of cleverness, civic pride, and daring choice. His tale is woven with both triumph and tragedy, for heroes were never given peace without cost. The myth begins with a debt. Crete, the island of kings and palaces, demanded tribute from Athens. 7 young men and 7 maidens were sent every 9 years to be consumed by the Minotaur, a creature half man and half bull, hidden within a labyrinth of winding passages built by the master craftsman Daedalus. This tribute weighed on Athens like a chain, and the city lived in dread each time the ships were prepared. Theseus, son of Aegeus, king of Athens, stepped forward to end the sorrow. Imagine the ship departing from the Athenian harbor, black sails billowing in the sea wind, families weeping along the shore. The waves carried both fear and resolve. Theseus stood among the chosen, tall, confident, the sun glinting off bronze. He promised his father he would slay the Minotaur and return with white sails as a sign of victory. That vow would be remembered, though not as he intended. The island of Crete gleamed with power. At Knossos, the palace sprawled like a small city, its corridors decorated with frescoes of dolphins, bull-leaping youths, and bright red columns. Archaeologists today have uncovered its ruins, a place so intricate that early explorers believed it truly was the labyrinth of legend. Within its walls, King Minos held sway, his wealth drawn from the sea, his pride matched only by his anger. The Minotaur, born of a divine curse and hidden shame, lived below in twisting passages that no one escaped. Yet in this palace, compassion stirred. Ariadne, daughter of Minos, looked upon Theseus and felt both love and pity. She offered him a gift that would become a symbol of cleverness for centuries, a ball of thread. "Tie this to the entrance," she whispered, "and let it lead you out again." The gift was simple but profound. Strength alone could not conquer the maze. Memory, patience, and guidance were required. Picture the labyrinth. Walls of stone rising high, passages turning upon themselves, silence heavy with dread. Torches flickered, shadows shifted, and the sound of hooves echoed faintly ahead. The Minotaur waited in the depths, a creature of fury, horned and powerful, abandoned by both men and gods. Into this place, stepped Theseus, the thread trailing behind him, marking his way like a line of hope. The battle itself is often told briefly, as if the clash could hardly be captured in words. The Minotaur lunged, horns flashing, hooves striking sparks on the stone. Theseus, agile and determined, met its charge with spear and strength. Dust rose, grunts and cries filled the passages, until at last the hero's arm struck true. The creature fell, its breath rattling, and silence spread through the labyrinth like a tide receding. Emerging once more into the night, Theseus followed the thread back to the entrance. The stars above seemed brighter, the air sweeter, as though the world itself sighed in relief. He and the other Athenians boarded their ship, carrying Ariadne with them, bound now by gratitude and love. The labyrinth had been conquered, its terror ended. Yet myths often turn at the moment of triumph. On the island of Naxos, Theseus abandoned Ariadne. The reasons differ in each telling. Some say Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy, claimed her as his bride, and Theseus could not resist divine will. Others say he betrayed her by choice, leaving her in sorrow. Whatever the cause, Ariadne's fate shifted into another story, and Theseus carried on. This shadow of betrayal softened the gleam of his heroism, a reminder that victories often came entangled with flaws. The return to Athens carried its own sorrow. Theseus had promised to hoist white sails if he triumphed, but in his haste or grief, he forgot. Black sails approached the coast, and King Aegeus, watching from a cliff, believed his son dead. In despair, he cast himself into the sea, which from then bore his name, the Aegean. Theseus became king, but his reign was marked by the loss of his father, a price paid for triumph. The story of the labyrinth lingered across centuries as both myth and symbol. Philosophers saw in it the journey of the soul through confusion toward clarity. Artists carved it on coins, mosaics, and church floors long after pagan temples had fallen. The winding design became a meditative path, a way to walk slowly toward the center and return, just as Theseus had walked. The thread of Ariadne became a metaphor for wisdom, guidance, and the fragile lifeline that allows us to move through confusion without being lost. Pause for a moment and imagine yourself holding such a thread. It lies soft in your palm, unbroken, steady. With each breath, you follow it forward through corridors of thought, past walls of worry, until at last you step into a quiet clearing. The Minotaur is gone, the night air is gentle, and stars wheel calmly overhead. The story that once frightened now soothes, for it reminds you that every maze has an exit if you are willing to move with patience and trust. The ruins of Knossos remain today, their staircases climbing nowhere, their frescoes still glowing with marine life and bull dances. Visitors walk the halls and wonder if the labyrinth was memory or invention. Archaeology offers facts: storage jars, throne rooms, painted dolphins. Myth offers meaning, a maze, a monster, and the courage to face both. Together they keep the story alive, bridging the gap between stone and imagination. As you drift now into deeper rest, let the labyrinth become soft in your mind, not a place of fear, but a gentle puzzle that unwinds itself as you breathe. Ariadne's thread is in your hand. The way is clear. The monster is gone. You walk toward quiet, guided by starlight, until only stillness remains. Story 7. Jason and the Quest for the Golden Fleece. The sea has always carried stories, and now we follow one of the greatest, the voyage of Jason and his companions, the Argonauts. Where Heracles embodied endurance and Theseus walked the maze, Jason's tale was of adventure upon open waters. A journey threaded with friendship, betrayal, and the shining lure of a prize beyond imagining, the Golden Fleece. The story begins in Iolcus, a city in Thessaly. Jason was the rightful heir, but his uncle Peleus had taken the throne. When Jason came of age, Peleus, fearful of prophecy, devised a test to rid himself of the young man without staining his own hands. He demanded Jason bring back the Golden Fleece, a treasure guarded far away in the land of Colchis, at the edge of the known world. The fleece, glowing with the memory of a divine ram, was a symbol of kingship and prosperity. To seek it was to risk everything. Jason did not go alone. He gathered heroes from across Greece, names that shimmer still in legend. Heracles was among them, at least for part of the voyage. Orpheus carried his lyre. Castor and Pollux, the divine twins, came with their skill in combat. Atalanta, swift-footed huntress, stood beside men as their equal. Together they boarded a ship unlike any other, the Argo, crafted by Argus with timber from Dodona, where sacred oaks whispered prophecies. In its prow was set a beam that spoke with a voice of fate, guiding them across the sea. Picture the departure. The ship gliding out of the harbor, oars striking water in rhythm, a sail billowing with promise. On the shore, families raised their hands in farewell. The air smelled of salt and pine. The cries of gulls circled overhead. This was no ordinary voyage. It was the first great naval expedition in Greek myth, the seed of every later journey sung by poets. The trials they faced were many. In Lemnos, an island ruled by women who had slain their husbands, the Argonauts lingered, tempted by comfort and affection. In another place, they confronted the Harpies, winged creatures who defiled the food of the blind prophet Phineus. With the aid of the Boreds, sons of the North Wind, they drove the Harpies away, earning Phineus's gratitude and his counsel for navigating the Symplegades, the clashing rocks. These rocks, legend said, smashed together whenever a ship tried to pass. Jason, following the prophet's advice, released a dove first. The bird flew swiftly, its tail feathers clipped as the rocks slammed shut. The Argo rode hard after, scraping only its stern as it broke through. The rocks fell still forever after, their power ended by courage and timing. It was a moment that showed the balance of daring and wisdom that defined the voyage. At last, they reached Colchis, where King Aeetes ruled. The fleece hung in a sacred grove, guarded by a sleepless dragon. Aeetes, unwilling to yield the treasure, set Jason impossible tasks. He was to yoke fire-breathing bulls, plow a field, and sow it with dragon's teeth from which armed warriors would spring. Jason, daunted, might have failed had not love entered the story. Medea, daughter of Aeetes and priestess of Hecate, saw Jason and felt her heart moved. She was skilled in enchantments, feared for her power, but her compassion guided her choice. She gave Jason charms to withstand the fire, counseled him to cast a stone among the warriors so they would turn upon each other, and finally led him to the dragon. With her magic, the beast was lulled, and the fleece, glowing like the sun caught in wool, was taken. Their escape was not simple. Pursued by Aeetes, they fled across seas and rivers. The versions of the tale differ. Some say Medea sacrificed her brother to delay her father, scattering his remains to slow pursuit. The story carries shadows as well as triumph, for myth often reminded listeners that gain and loss walk side by side. In the end, the Argo returned to Greece, the fleece secured. Jason triumphant in name, but fated to sorrow in the years ahead. Pause here and imagine the fleece itself. It hangs across a branch, shimmering with golden threads, soft yet radiant, like sunlight woven into cloth. To the Greeks, it was a symbol of divine favor, but to you, resting now, it is simply a gentle glow, warm and comforting, like a blanket of safety drawn across your shoulders. The voyage of the Argonauts inspired not only poetry, but geography. Later generations identified their route with real places: the Bosporus, the Black Sea, the rivers of Colchis. Archaeologists in modern Georgia have even noted ancient practices of using fleeces to trap gold dust from mountain streams, a memory that may lie beneath the legend. Thus myth and history, imagination and practice were braided together like strands of rope. The ship Argo itself was remembered as a marvel. Some said it was the first vessel to unite Greece, its crew drawn from many regions, showing how cooperation could overcome trials. In this way, the story was not only about Jason, but about fellowship. Each hero carried strength, and together they achieved what no one could alone. The myth reassured listeners that community mattered as much as individual glory. When Jason returned, however, his story did not rest. He betrayed Medea by seeking another bride, and in her grief and fury, she struck back with vengeance so terrible that her name became a byword for passion and power. But that is another part of the myth, one that reminds us that love, once a gift, can also wound when it is broken. For now, hold only the gentle image of a ship gliding through calm waters, the fleece folded safely on its deck, heroes resting with oars laid aside. The sea is quiet, the stars above are constant, and the long journey has found a pause. As you breathe, you too are carried on calm waves, your body cradled, your mind at ease. The story reassures you that even across wide seas, even through trials, a safe harbor waits. Story 8, The Riddle of Oedipus. The sea quiets behind us, the Argonauts at rest in their harbor, and now we turn toward the land again, toward crossroads, riddles, and a story that has echoed through centuries with both sorrow and wisdom. This is the tale of Oedipus, king of Thebes, whose name became bound to fate itself. Where Jason's journey stretched across oceans, Oedipus's path curved inward toward questions of identity, prophecy, and the limits of human understanding. The myth begins with a warning. Laius, king of Thebes, received a prophecy from Delphi. If he had a son, that child would one day kill him. To escape this fate, he exposed the infant Oedipus on a mountainside, his feet pierced and bound. Yet fate, the Greeks believed, cannot be escaped by cruelty. The child was rescued and raised in Corinth, unaware of his birth. His name, Oedipus, meant swollen foot, a reminder of those early wounds. As a young man, he too sought counsel at Delphi, and the oracle told him he was destined to kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, and believing his Corinthian parents to be his true blood, he fled the city, hoping distance might undo destiny. Along the road, at a lonely crossroads, he quarreled with an older man, and in anger killed him, not knowing this was Laius, his true father. The first part of the prophecy was fulfilled in silence, unseen by him. The road carried him to Thebes, where the city lay under the shadow of a monster. The Sphinx, a creature with a woman's face, lion's body, and wings of a bird, crouched outside the gates. She posed a riddle to all who approached. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? Those who failed to answer were devoured. Thebes mourned, its streets emptied, its king already lost. Oedipus listened, thought, and replied, "Man, who crawls as an infant, walks upright in youth, and leans upon a staff in old age." The riddle unraveled. The Sphinx cast herself from the cliffs, and the city rejoiced. In gratitude, the Thebans crowned Oedipus king, and gave him the hand of Jocasta, queen and widow of Laius. Unknowing, he had fulfilled the second half of the prophecy. He lived in seeming triumph, wise and strong, until the truth began to whisper at the edges of his reign. Imagine the city of Thebes, beneath its 7 gates, bustling with markets and music, children playing near fountains, elders gathered in shaded courtyards. Yet beneath this life was unease. A plague struck, famine stalked the land, and the oracle's answer returned. The city was unclean, polluted by hidden crime. Step by step, Oedipus sought the truth, determined to rid his people of the curse. He summoned prophets, questioned shepherds, and demanded honesty. Each clue pressed him closer to the unbearable revelation that he himself was the source. The moment of discovery is one of the most famous in Greek literature, remembered especially in Sophocles' tragedy Oedipus Rex. Jocasta, realizing the truth, took her own life. Oedipus, horrified at what he had done, blinded himself, saying he could no longer bear to see the world he had cursed. Stripped of crown and sight, he became a wanderer, guided only by his daughter Antigone's devotion. His story became not one of triumph, but of endurance in grief, of learning to walk even when light is gone. Pause here and consider the riddle itself. Morning, noon, and evening, 3 stages of life told through the image of walking. It is not a cruel riddle, but a gentle reminder that human beings change, that each stage carries its own dignity. The infant crawls, the youth strides, the elder leans with wisdom. Oedipus answered correctly, and yet the deeper riddle was his own life. How to live with knowledge, how to carry guilt, how to accept fate without surrendering to despair. The Greeks told his story not to condemn him, but to reflect upon the mystery of existence. He did not sin with intention. He walked into prophecy blindly. His downfall was not wickedness, but the limit of human vision. In this way, the myth mirrors our own uncertainties. We cannot always know the full shape of our lives. We walk as best we can, guided by love, patience, and humility. The ruins of Thebes remain, scattered across the modern Greek landscape, stones weathered by time. Archaeologists trace walls, gates, and fragments of pottery, but the myth of Oedipus is what keeps the city alive in memory. Sophocles' plays, performed in Athens in the 5th century BCE, gave the story form so powerful that philosophers still discuss it. Aristotle praised the drama as a perfect tragedy, and later thinkers like Freud borrowed its name to describe the hidden tensions of the human mind. The myth became not only a story of kings, but a mirror for the soul. As you rest tonight, let the image of the riddle settle softly within you. Life is a path of stages, morning, noon, evening. Each is natural, each necessary. No stage is lesser, for all belong to the circle of existence. Oedipus's story reminds us that even when sight is lost, there remains a way forward, through patience, through trust, through the hands of those who love us. Picture the crossroads where 3 roads meet, silent in moonlight. A breeze stirs the dust, and the night sky arches overhead. There is no need to fear which road you take, for each leads onward, each is part of the pattern. The Sphinx no longer waits, the riddle has been answered. You are free to walk with steady steps into the quiet of your own evening, guided by breath and surrounded by peace. Story 9. Antigone's Defiance. The story of Oedipus does not end with his blindness or his wandering. The thread of fate, once spun, continues through his children, and none more bravely than his daughter, Antigone. She was the quiet companion who guided him when sight was gone, her hands gentle on his arm, her voice steady in his ear. Where others turned away, she remained, her devotion stronger than shame. In her, we see not only sorrow, but courage. A courage that even today speaks in whispers across the centuries. When Oedipus at last found rest in the grove at Colonus, sacred to the Furies, Antigone and her sister Ismene mourned him. But the shadow of Thebes still lingered. After his death, his sons, Eteocles and Polynices, fought for the throne. Their quarrel grew into war, the 7 against Thebes, where Polynices led an army against his own city. The brothers faced each other at the gates and struck each other down, dying by one another's hand. The throne passed, but Thebes was left scarred, its fields drenched in blood. Creon, their uncle, became king. His decree was swift and harsh. Eteocles, defender of the city, would be buried with honor. Polynices, branded traitor, would be left unburied, his body cast outside the walls for dogs and birds. In the ancient world, this was not merely punishment but doom. Without burial, the soul was believed to wander restlessly, denied peace in the underworld. To Antigone, this command was unbearable. To her, both brothers were family, and duty to the dead outweighed the edicts of kings. Sophocles, in his play Antigone, captured the moment of her choice. She spoke not with anger, but with quiet certainty. That divine law, older than any ruler, required the rites of burial. She knew the penalty. She knew death awaited her, but she refused silence. Alone, she sprinkled dust upon her brother's body, offering the simplest, most human of gestures, one handful of earth. That act was enough to defy the king. Imagine her standing there in the grey dawn, the city walls rising behind her, the corpse of her brother still and heavy before her. The air is chill. Her hands shake, not with fear, but with resolve. She bends, scatters the soil, and in that instant the weight of eternal law feels lighter. She has done what must be done. Creon's rage was swift. Antigone was arrested, brought before him. Their dialogue is one of the most enduring in literature. The clash of state versus conscience, law versus love. Creon insisted order must be maintained, that disobedience endangered the city. Antigone replied that there are laws deeper than those written on tablets, laws of the gods, eternal and unshakable. Her voice was calm, her words simple, but her defiance burned brighter than any army. The chorus in Sophocles' play murmured in sorrow, recognizing the tragedy on both sides. Creon sought stability, Antigone sought justice, yet the inflexibility of both doomed them. Antigone was sentenced to be sealed alive in a tomb, her fate entwined with silence and stone. But as in all tragedies, punishment turned inward. Creon's own son, Haemon, who loved Antigone, pleaded for mercy. When denied, he too fell into despair, taking his own life beside her. The queen, Eurydice, followed. Creon, once so firm, was left shattered, surrounded by loss. Pause here and let the image soften. Antigone is not only a figure of tragedy, but of devotion. Her story is told even now because it touches something enduring, the courage to act with integrity, even when the cost is unbearable. For those who listened in Athens, her defiance was not a tale of rebellion for its own sake, but a reminder that humanity and love stand higher than decrees. The ancient Greeks held burial rites sacred. Archaeology shows us graves lined with offerings, pottery, jewelry, coins placed in mouths or hands for Charon, the ferryman of the dead. To deny burial was to deny a soul's passage. In that light, Antigone's act was not political alone but spiritual, a gesture of compassion that no punishment could erase. She became a symbol of love that outlives fear, of duty that shines even in darkness. Even in later ages, her name has been remembered. Philosophers have written of her as a voice of conscience. Poets have sung of her as a figure of resistance. To this day, when people speak of standing for what is right, even against power, they sometimes invoke Antigone. She walks quietly beside anyone who honors love above law, anyone who remembers the dead with dignity. Now close your eyes and imagine a tomb not as a place of punishment, but of silence filled with light. Antigone sits there, her hands folded, her gaze steady. Around her the stone is cool, the air still, but within her is peace, for she knows she has done what love required. The city outside may rage, kings may decree, but her heart rests. In that stillness you too may rest, knowing that integrity carries its own reward. Thebes fades into shadow. The quarrels of kings and brothers recede. What remains is the image of a young woman kneeling in the dust, scattering earth with quiet hands, whispering words of farewell. That image carries gentleness into your breath, assurance into your sleep. For as the Greeks knew, death is not only an ending but a passage, and love is the thread that guides the soul onward. Story 10. Perseus and the Gorgon. The threads of Greek myth weave together stories of grief and defiance, and now they carry us toward one of light and daring, the tale of Perseus. Where Antigone's courage lay in love and conscience, Perseus's story unfolds in the gleam of bronze and the shimmer of wings. His name is remembered for a single act that has glowed through centuries, the slaying of Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze turned all who looked upon her into stone. The story begins with prophecy, as so many Greek myths do. Acrisius, king of Argos, was warned by the oracle at Delphi that his daughter's son would kill him. To prevent this, he locked his daughter Danae in a bronze chamber hidden from all. Yet Zeus, moved by desire, entered as a shower of golden light, and from that light Perseus was born. When Acrisius discovered the child, he did not dare kill him outright, but cast mother and son adrift at sea in a wooden chest. The waves bore them safely to the island of Seriphos, where fishermen raised Perseus until manhood. But fate does not remain distant. The king of Seriphos, Polydectes, sought Danae and wished to remove Perseus. He demanded a gift, the head of Medusa, the mortal Gorgon, as if to send the young man to certain death. Medusa's sisters were immortal, but she alone could be slain. With serpents for hair and eyes that petrified, she dwelled at the edge of the world, beyond the ocean's stream. The task was impossible, or so it seemed. Perseus received help from the gods themselves. Athena, goddess of wisdom, lent him a polished bronze shield bright as a mirror. Hermes, swift messenger, gave him a curved sword and winged sandals. Hades offered a helm of invisibility, and Hephaestus a bag to hold the severed head. Armed with these gifts, Perseus set out, guided first to the grey, three ancient sisters who shared a single eye and a single tooth. Imagine them in a cave by the sea, grey-skinned and ancient, passing the eye between their hands. Perseus, with cunning, seized it and demanded they reveal the way to Medusa. Reluctantly, they directed him onward. Now picture the place of the Gorgons, a rocky shore where waves crash endlessly, the air heavy with salt and dread. Statues litter the ground, not carved by human hands, but once living figures turned to stone by a single glance. Some kneel in terror, others raise shields that will never move again. Among them lies Medusa, her hair alive with hissing serpents, her face terrible to behold. Perseus approached carefully, the shield held before him, reflecting her image like a pond of bronze. He dared not look directly. His sandals carried him lightly across the stones. The snakes writhed, sensing him, but she slept, her breath deep, her brow furrowed even in rest. With one swift stroke, he severed her head. From her neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant children of Poseidon. Perseus placed the head within his bag, its power intact even in death. The return voyage carried its own marvels. As Perseus flew above the sea, he came upon a maiden chained to a rock, waves crashing at her feet. This was Andromeda, daughter of Cepheus and Cassiopeia. Her mother's pride had angered the sea god Poseidon, who sent a monster to ravage their land. To appease the god, Andromeda was offered as sacrifice. Perseus descended, and with the Gorgon's head he turned the monster to stone, saving her. Together they returned to her family, and she became his bride, her name bound forever to stars in the night sky. When Perseus returned at last to Seriphos, he found Polydectes still pressing his mother. At the banquet hall, he drew the head of Medusa from its bag, and the king and his followers hardened into stone where they sat. Justice had come, sudden and irreversible. The head he later gave to Athena, who set it upon her shield, the Aegis, where its terrible power served to ward off enemies. The myth of Perseus is one of brightness and aid, of a hero guided by gods and gifted with tools to face the impossible. For listeners in ancient Greece, his story reassured that courage was not alone, that wisdom, swiftness, and even mercy from the divine accompanied those who acted with resolve. Perseus's calm use of reflection, his refusal to face the Gorgon directly, became a lesson. Sometimes strength lies not in force, but in cleverness, in knowing how to turn danger aside without confronting it head-on. Archaeologists have uncovered images of Perseus and Medusa across pottery, sculpture, and mosaics. One of the oldest depictions, on a 7th century BCE bronze, shows her with a wide, grimacing face, tongue protruding, eyes bulging. Later artists softened her, portraying her with beauty, touched by terror. In every age, however, the mirror shield glints, the hero averts his gaze, and the story holds. Pause here and imagine that polished shield, smooth and gleaming, like a still pond beneath moonlight. You look not into danger, but into reflection, safe, distant, yet clear. Like Perseus, you carry protection against what would freeze you. Your own fears may hiss like serpents, but held at arm's length they lose their power. Reflection steadies you, guiding you toward calm. Now lift your gaze to the sky. Andromeda's stars still stretch across the heavens, joined by Perseus, Cassiopeia, and Cepheus. On quiet nights, ancient Greeks lay beneath these constellations and retold the tale, pointing to the patterns overhead. The myth became a map, assuring them that courage and love were written into the very sky. As you rest, let the night above you take that same shape. Stars wheel gently, patterns knit across darkness. The sea is quiet, the shield gleams, the serpents fall silent. The monster is gone, the maiden freed, the hero returns home. You too are safe, held in the embrace of night, your own breath as steady as the waves. Sleep comes softly, a gift of calm reflection, a shield against worry. You drift, carried like Perseus upon the wind, weightless, untroubled, free. Story 11. Achilles and the Fires of Troy. The story of Perseus glows with divine gifts and bright victories, but now we step into a tale heavier with shadow, the Trojan War, where courage and wrath burn together. Among all the warriors of that long conflict, one name rose brightest and burned fiercest: Achilles, son of the sea goddess Thetis and the mortal Peleus. His was a story of strength touched by prophecy, a life both glorious and short, remembered for wrath, friendship, and a death that shaped the very meaning of heroism. The war itself began, as myths so often do, with a quarrel among gods. Eris, goddess of strife, cast a golden apple marked for the fairest into a gathering of goddesses. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed it. Paris, prince of Troy, was chosen to judge. Each offered him a gift. Hera promised power, Athena wisdom and victory, Aphrodite the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose beauty, awarding the apple to Aphrodite, and in return she promised him Helen, queen of Sparta. When Paris carried her away to Troy, war followed, for Helen's husband Menelaus and his brother Agamemnon called upon the oaths of Greece to bring her back. The armies gathered, ships filled the harbors of Aulis, and among them stood Achilles, young, swift, and fierce. His mother had tried to save him from war. Some said she dipped him in the river Styx, leaving him invulnerable except for his heel. Others told how she hid him among maidens, disguised in women's robes, until Odysseus exposed him with the gift of weapons. Whatever the truth, fate pulled him to Troy, for prophecy said the city would not fall without him. When the Greeks reached Troy, the war stretched year upon year. The walls of the city loomed high, its defenders brave. Hector, prince of Troy, led them with steady hand and noble heart. For 9 years the fighting raged, the plain before the city scarred by chariots and fire. Songs tell of battles like waves, of spears glittering like fields of grain in sunlight. Yet the war was not only steel, but pride, and it was pride that set Achilles' wrath ablaze. Agamemnon, leader of the Greeks, seized a woman who had been given to Achilles as prize. To Achilles, it was insult beyond bearing. In fury, he withdrew from battle, refusing to fight. Without him, the Greeks faltered. The Trojans pressed their advantage. Flames reached the ships, and hope dimmed. Only when his closest companion, Patroclus, donned Achilles' armor and entered the fight, did the tide turn. Yet Patroclus fell, struck down by Hector. The grief of Achilles was vast, a storm that shook even the gods. He returned to battle, his rage terrible, his spear unstoppable. He chased Hector around the walls of Troy 3 times, until at last he struck him down. But anger did not end with victory. Achilles dragged Hector's body behind his chariot, a sight that filled all who watched with sorrow. Only when Priam, aged king of Troy, came humbly into the Greek camp, begging for his son's body, did Achilles relent. In that moment, the hero who had seemed almost a force of nature revealed his humanity. He wept with Priam, and together they mourned. Pause here and picture that tent, quiet in the night. Two men sit across from each other, one young and strong, the other old and weary. Between them lies grief, shared like bread. In this image, listeners found something greater than war, compassion, the recognition that even enemies carry love, loss, and longing. It is one of the softest and most enduring moments in all Greek myth. Yet Achilles himself was bound to prophecy. He knew he would die at Troy, that his life would be short, but his fame eternal. Some said Apollo guided Paris's arrow to his heel, the single vulnerable place. Others told that the gods themselves demanded his death. However it came, the hero fell, and with him the song of the Iliad closed. His body was burned, his ashes placed with Patroclus, their friendship sealed in eternity. The Trojan War did not end with him. It dragged on until the Greeks, with cunning, built a wooden horse and left it at Troy's gates. The Trojans, believing it a gift, brought it inside. At night, warriors emerged, opening the gates, and the city fell in fire. Yet in the Iliad, the heart of the war is not conquest, but the story of Achilles, his wrath, his grief, and his fragile humanity shining through the smoke of battle. The ruins of Troy still lie in modern-day Turkey, layers of stone and ash revealing centuries of settlement. Archaeologists have uncovered walls, towers, and evidence of fire that may match the memory of a great war. Whether the Trojan War was history, myth, or both, its stories have shaped human imagination for nearly 3,000 years. For those who listened in ancient Greece, Achilles embodied the paradox of life, that greatness and fragility are bound together. He was nearly invulnerable, yet undone by a single heel. He was unstoppable in battle, yet broken by grief. His name lived forever, but his life was brief. This paradox comforted listeners, for it showed that even the strongest were not beyond sorrow, and that sorrow itself could be dignified. As you rest now, imagine the plain before Troy, not filled with battle, but with silence. The spears are lowered, the fires burn low, the sea washes calmly against the shore. Achilles' tent is quiet, his wrath spent, his heart softened by grief. Priam has returned to his city with his son, and for one moment there is peace. That peace is yours as well. You need not fight, need not rage. You can set down your armor, rest your body, and let the night carry you gently into sleep. Story 12. The Journey of Odysseus. The fires of Troy fade into embers, the city smoldering in ruin, and from that smoke rises another story, one of wandering and patience. This is the tale of Odysseus, king of Ithaca, whose name became synonymous with cleverness, endurance, and the longing for home. His journey, told in Homer's Odyssey, is not only of distant islands and strange beings, but of the human heart's struggle to return to where it belongs. When the war ended, Odysseus did not sail straight home. The gods, stirred by his pride and cunning, set trials upon his path. His first stop was the land of the lotus eaters, where the fruit of the lotus dulled memory and desire. His men, after tasting, wished only to remain in languid forgetfulness. Odysseus dragged them back to the ships, for he knew that forgetting home was the most dangerous fate of all. Next came the Cyclops, Polyphemus, a giant shepherd with one eye in his forehead. Odysseus and his men, trapped in the cave, watched in horror as the giant devoured some of their companions. With guile, Odysseus gave him wine and told him his name was Nobody. When the Cyclops slept, they drove a sharpened stake into his eye, blinding him. As they escaped, clinging beneath the bellies of sheep, the Cyclops cried out, "Nobody has harmed me!" And the other giants paid no heed. Yet pride undid Odysseus. As he sailed away, he revealed his true name, and Polyphemus prayed to his father, Poseidon, to curse him. The sea god heard, and the journey grew longer still. Pause for a moment and imagine that cave. The smell of wool and smoke, the sound of hooves upon stone, the heavy breathing of the giant. Then imagine the sea afterward, stars stretched wide, the oars cutting water. Relief, but also the first taste of fate's weight. Odysseus had won, but victory carried its own price. The wanderings continued. Aeolus, keeper of the winds, gave Odysseus a bag filled with breezes to guide him home. But his crew, curious and suspicious, opened it and storms burst forth, driving them back into the open sea. On the island of Circe, the enchantress turned men into swine until Hermes provided the herb moly to resist her magic. Odysseus mastered her spell, and she became his ally, hosting him for a year before sending him on. It was Circe who instructed him to descend into the underworld, to seek the wisdom of the dead. Picture Odysseus on that dark shore, pouring libations of honey and milk, blood flowing for the shades to drink. The spirits rose, warriors of Troy, his mother, and the prophet Tiresias, who warned him of dangers yet to come. Among the shadows he saw Achilles, who declared that he would rather be a servant alive than a king among the dead. Such words must have struck Odysseus deeply, a reminder that glory fades, but life itself is precious. Onward he sailed, past the sirens whose voices lured sailors to destruction. Odysseus, longing to hear their song, had his men plug their ears with wax and tie him to the mast. Their voices promised wisdom, beauty, secrets of the world, but bound fast, he endured, and the ship passed safely. The image lingers even now. Temptation sings, but restraint carries us through. Then came Scylla and Charybdis, monsters set on either side of a narrow strait. Scylla, with 6 heads, snatched sailors from the decks. Charybdis, a whirlpool, swallowed the sea itself. To pass between them was to lose some but save the whole. Odysseus chose the lesser loss, steering close to Scylla, watching helplessly as his men were taken. The choice was terrible, yet necessary, and he carried its weight in silence. At last they reached the island of Helios, where cattle sacred to the sun grazed. Though warned not to touch them, the crew, driven by hunger, killed and feasted. For this, Zeus sent a storm that shattered the ship. Alone, Odysseus clung to wreckage, drifting for days until at last he came to the island of Ogygia. There, Calypso, a goddess, held him for years, offering immortality if he would remain. But his heart yearned only for Ithaca, for Penelope, his wife, and Telemachus, his son. When at last the gods relented, Odysseus built a raft and sailed again. After storms and more wanderings, he washed upon the shores of the Phaeacians, who welcomed him, listened to his story, and carried him finally home. Ithaca was not as he had left it. Suitors crowded his halls, pressing Penelope to choose a new husband, devouring his stores, mocking his absence. She had waited 20 years, weaving by day and unraveling by night to delay her choice. Odysseus, disguised as a beggar, entered his house quietly, testing loyalty, preparing. At last he revealed himself, stringing his great bow and sending an arrow through 12 axe heads, a feat no other could perform. The suitors fell, and his home was restored. Pause here and picture Penelope, calm and patient, her loom before her, her heart steadfast through 2 decades of silence. Her story is as great as Odysseus's, not a voyage across seas, but a voyage of endurance, of waiting, of faith that love could outlast absence. For listeners in Greece, her constancy was as heroic as any battle. The ruins of Ithaca today are quiet, its hills green, its shores kissed by gentle waves. Archaeologists still search for traces of Odysseus's palace, though what remains most clearly is not stone, but story. The Odyssey itself, sung by bards, carried across centuries, reminds us that life's journey is long, filled with storms and temptations, yet always guided by the pull of home. As you rest now, let that word home be soft in your thoughts. A hearth glowing with fire, a loved one's face, a place where burdens are set down. You too have traveled through days of labor and trial. Tonight, you are the weary sailor returned, the wanderer at last embraced. The waves are calm, the loom is still, the long journey has ended. Sleep is your Ithaca, and it waits, warm, steady, patient. Story 13. The House of Agamemnon. The journey of Odysseus shows us the joy of return, but not every hero of Troy found peace when the sea carried him home. Some returns were shadowed by betrayal and vengeance, none more famous than the story of Agamemnon, commander of the Greek host. His house in Mycenae was already troubled before the war began, cursed by the crimes of his ancestors, and when he returned, victory brought not celebration, but death. The story begins long before Agamemnon himself. His family, the house of Atreus, was marked by blood. Atreus and his brother Thyestes quarreled bitterly for the throne of Mycenae. To avenge betrayal, Atreus served his brother a banquet of his own children, a horror that stained the line forever. From such a beginning came Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus, inheriting not only power, but curse. To the Greeks, such tales explained how violence rippled across generations, each act of cruelty echoing into the lives of descendants. When Troy called, Agamemnon commanded the greatest fleet, yet even at the start, sacrifice was demanded. The winds at Aulis would not rise, and the seer Calchas declared that Artemis required the life of Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia. Versions differ. Some say she was slain, others that the goddess whisked her away, but the shadow of that choice fell across the king forever. His wife, Clytemnestra, grieved and enraged, waiting through the long war with bitterness in her heart. After 10 years, when Troy at last burned, Agamemnon sailed home. In Aeschylus's tragedy Agamemnon, the scene is set with foreboding. Clytemnestra greets him with calm courtesy, weaving words as carefully as she spreads rich tapestries for his feet. She invites him to walk across crimson cloth, a gesture both of honor and of hidden trap, for in Greek thought, such extravagance was almost sacrilege, reserved for the gods. Agamemnon, weary, yields and enters his house. Inside waits betrayal. Clytemnestra, aided by her lover Aegisthus, strikes him down as he bathes, blood mingling with water, the curse of Atreus fulfilled once more. Her act is told not as madness, but as deliberate vengeance. She had lost her daughter, suffered her husband's arrogance, and now claimed power for herself. In her voice, playwrights gave audiences the unsettling image of a queen who declared justice on her own terms. Pause here and imagine the palace of Mycenae. Even today its ruins remain. Massive stone walls, the lion gate with its carved beasts watching above the threshold. Travelers in antiquity marveled at its cyclopean masonry, stones so huge they believed giants had set them in place. Within those walls, centuries earlier, storytellers placed the scene of Agamemnon's return. The weight of stone mirrors the weight of fate, solid, unyielding, heavy with memory. But the story does not end with Clytemnestra. The curse demanded another turn. Orestes, son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, grew to manhood haunted by the demand for vengeance. Apollo's oracle commanded him to avenge his father, yet to kill one's mother was the greatest of sins. Torn between duties, Orestes chose the path of blood. With his sister Electra, he returned, confronted Clytemnestra, and struck her down. From that moment, the Furies pursued him. These ancient goddesses, older than Olympus, embodied vengeance itself. They drove him mad, whispering, shrieking, chasing him across Greece. His guilt could not be washed away by swords or prayers. It was only when he reached Athens that resolution came. There, in the plays of Aeschylus, Athena herself intervened, establishing a court of law to judge him. The vote was tied, and the goddess cast her ballot for mercy. Orestes was absolved, and the cycle of blood was ended by justice, not by another killing. This ending carried deep meaning for Athenians. It marked a turning from tribal vengeance toward civic order, from endless retaliation to trial and balance. The myth, told in the Oresteia, reflected the city's own pride in its courts, its belief that reason and law could tame the wildfire of revenge. For listeners, it was both a story of family tragedy and a vision of hope, that curses could be ended, that cycles of pain might be broken. Pause for a moment and feel the gentleness of that image. A goddess lifting her hand, voices falling silent, and the Furies once shrieking transformed into the Eumenides, the kindly ones, guardians of justice rather than avengers of blood. What once was fury becomes protection. What once was curse becomes care. The ruins of Mycenae remain quiet beneath the sun, olive groves swaying nearby. Visitors walk through the Lion Gate, past tombs called beehives for their domed shape, and down into dark chambers where treasures once lay. Gold masks, like the famous Mask of Agamemnon, now rest in museums, gleaming reminders of the wealth and power that inspired myth. Archaeology gives us stone and metal. Myth gives us voice and meaning. Together they preserve the echo of Agamemnon's house. As you rest tonight, let the noise of vengeance fall away. Do not linger on the quarrels of kings and queens, nor on the cries of the Furies. Instead, hold onto the image of resolution. The court, the balance, the moment when mercy enters. The cycle ends, the curse dissolves, the house breathes again. Justice is not wrath, but quiet order, and that quiet is yours as well. The story of Agamemnon's return teaches that even in bloodiest paths there may come stillness, an end to pursuit. For you, lying beneath blankets, the end of day is such a stillness. Whatever quarrels or worries pursued, you fade as night closes gently. The palace doors shut, the torches burn low, and peace enters like Athena's hand. You are absolved, released, free to sleep in calm. Story 14. Prometheus and the Gift of Fire. From the halls of Mycenae, we step further back, into a time before the Trojan War, before even the rule of Olympian gods seemed fully settled. It is here that we find the Titan Prometheus, friend of humankind, whose story flickers with fire and endures with defiance. Where kings and heroes struggled with fate, Prometheus struggled with Zeus himself, carrying in his hands a gift that forever changed the human world. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, was said to be wiser than many of the gods. While his fellow Titans battled against Zeus in the great war that shaped Olympus, Prometheus foresaw that the younger gods would triumph. He sided with them, offering counsel, and for that he was spared when the others were cast into Tartarus. Yet his loyalty was not to Zeus alone, it was also to mortals, fragile beings just learning how to shape their lives. In the earliest times, people lived without fire. They shivered in the cold, stumbled in the dark, ate food raw. Zeus, stern ruler, wished them to remain dependent, humble before the divine, but Prometheus saw their potential. In pity and love, he stole a spark from the forge of Hephaestus or the chariot of the sun, depending on the tale, and carried it hidden in a hollow reed down to earth. With that flame, humanity learned to cook, to forge metal, to craft homes, to gather in warmth. Civilization began with that flickering gift. Imagine that first fire, a small flame in the night, its glow warming hands, its crackle frightening away beasts. Sparks rise into the sky, echoing stars. Around it people gather, their faces painted with light and shadow, their voices stronger in its comfort. To this day, each hearth, each lamp carries an echo of Prometheus's gift. But Zeus did not forgive. Angered at this theft, he devised punishments both for Prometheus and for humankind. For mortals, he commanded the creation of Pandora, the first woman, crafted with beauty by the gods and given a jar filled with gifts, or in darker versions with hidden evils. When Pandora opened it, sorrow, toil, and death escaped into the world, leaving only hope at the bottom. Thus, the Greeks explained the presence of suffering, balancing the blessing of fire with the burden of hardship. For Prometheus himself, Zeus decreed a torment that would endure through ages. Bound in chains to a lonely rock in the Caucasus Mountains, he was left exposed to wind and storm. Each day, an eagle descended, tearing at his liver, and each night the organ grew back, only for the torment to begin anew. Immortal, he could not die, only endure. His crime had been compassion, his sentence was endless pain. Pause here and picture that mountain. The sky is vast, the air thin, the stone cold beneath him. The eagle's shadow passes across the cliffs, wings beating slowly. Yet Prometheus does not cry out in despair. In some versions he laughs, mocking Zeus, enduring with pride. His defiance lies not in strength of arms, but in endurance of spirit. For listeners, his image became a symbol of resistance, of loyalty to humanity, even against divine wrath. The myth does not end in silence. Centuries later, Heracles, passing on his own labors, came upon Prometheus. With an arrow, he slew the eagle and broke the chains. Zeus grudgingly allowed the Titan his freedom, though only after Prometheus revealed secrets of the future, that one day a child might rise who would threaten the throne of Olympus. In this way, reconciliation came, but the memory of suffering remained. The Greeks told this tale in hushed tones, for it touched upon the daring of mortals to challenge the gods. Prometheus was admired even as his defiance warned of danger. Aeschylus, in his play Prometheus Bound, gave him words of fierce pride. He claimed his gift of fire and all the arts of civilization as proof of his love for mankind. In his voice, audiences heard not only myth but philosophy, the idea that knowledge and progress come at a cost, that compassion often demands sacrifice. Archaeologists find evidence of ancient hearths across Greece, blackened stones where fire once burned thousands of years ago. Each carries the same meaning: warmth, food, light. Though the science of flame is no longer mystery, the story of Prometheus endures because it wraps that simple spark in compassion and defiance. As you rest tonight, imagine holding a small flame cupped in your hands. It glows softly, steady but not fierce, warm against your palms. Around you is darkness, but the flame is enough. It is safety, it is knowledge, it is companionship. Prometheus gave it long ago, and through all the centuries it has passed, from hearth to hearth, from lamp to lamp, now reaching you, reaching. The mountain fades, the eagle no longer circles. What remains is the fire, glowing in silence, free of chains. Prometheus' endurance becomes your own quiet strength, a reminder that even when life brings trial, there is always warmth to be found, always hope remaining in the jar. In this way, myth once more becomes comfort. You are not bound, you are not alone. The fire glows, your breath steadies, the night surrounds you gently. Rest in that glow, a gift carried through time, soft, eternal, kind. Story 15, The Legacy of Olympus. The story of Prometheus glows like fire against the night, and from that flame we turn at last to Olympus itself, the shining seat of the gods, where storms gather and clear, and where myths found their anchor. It is here, on that high mountain, that Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Poseidon, Demeter, and the others made their home, shaping the world below with their quarrels and gifts. Olympus was not distant in the imagination of the Greeks. It was visible, snow-crowned and massive, its summit often hidden in cloud. To look upon it was to be reminded that the divine was near, watching, unpredictable, but also full of beauty. The Olympian gods were not abstract ideals. They quarreled, laughed, fell in love, and took sides in human struggles. Zeus hurled thunderbolts, but also wandered in disguises. Hera guarded marriage fiercely, sometimes with jealousy. Athena offered wisdom and strategy, guiding heroes like Odysseus. Apollo brought the clarity of prophecy and the beauty of music. Artemis ran with wild deer in forests, while Poseidon churned the seas with his trident. They were reflections of the forces of nature and the patterns of human life, magnified into divine form. Temples rose in their honor, columns gleaming white against the blue sky. At Olympia, athletes gathered to compete in games sacred to Zeus, their bodies striving toward excellence as hymns rang in the air. At Delphi, Apollo's oracle spoke in riddles, her words shaping the decisions of kings. At Eleusis, Demeter and Persephone's mysteries gave comfort to those fearing death. The gods lived not only on Olympus, but in the stone and song of every city, woven into the very rhythm of daily life. Pause here and imagine walking through a sanctuary. Marble shines in sunlight. Olive trees cast gentle shade. Incense drifts upward. A chorus sings, the air alive with flutes and lyres. This is not a world of silence, but of presence, where myth and ritual bound the community together. To participate was to feel part of something vast, to be reminded that joy and sorrow alike were shared. Greek myths endured because they did more than explain. They evoked. They spoke of why crops grow and why storms strike, but also of why people grieve, why they hope, why they strive for meaning. Demeter taught that loss can be endured and seasons return. Orpheus showed that beauty can soften even the underworld, though longing remains. Heracles embodied the endurance of trial. Theseus revealed that cleverness can overcome the maze of fear. Jason and the Argonauts showed the power of fellowship, even amid betrayal. Oedipus and Antigone taught that conscience and fate entwine, sometimes painfully, sometimes nobly. Perseus showed how reflection itself can defeat terror. Achilles burned brightly, reminding us that even the strongest are fragile. Odysseus revealed the patience required to reach home. Agamemnon's house warned of cycles of vengeance, while Prometheus gave the spark that begins civilization. Together, these stories formed not a single path, but a constellation, like the stars above the Aegean. Each myth shone with its own light, but together they traced patterns that guided listeners through the night of existence. For those who listened in ancient Greece, they were not only entertainment, but orientation. Myths were maps of the land, of the heavens, of the human heart. Even today, their echoes remain. Archaeologists uncover temples, inscriptions, frescoes, and pottery, yet it is the myths that animate those ruins. The Parthenon stands in Athens, its columns weathered but proud, still whispering of Athena's protection. The theatre at Epidaurus, with perfect acoustics, still carries the voices of tragedies like Antigone and Oedipus Rex. The ruins of Troy, Mycenae, Knossos, all retain their power because story breathes through stone. For you, lying now in stillness, these myths become something gentler. Not battles, not curses, not prophecies, but lullabies. The thread of Ariadne becomes a line of comfort guiding you through thought. The lyre of Orpheus becomes a melody in your breath. The pelt of Heracles' lion becomes a blanket of protection across your body. The shield of Perseus becomes the calm of reflection, guarding your mind from worry. The fire of Prometheus becomes warmth in your chest. Close your eyes and imagine Olympus above, not storm-crowned but peaceful. Clouds drift, sunlight glimmers, the gods are quiet. They look down not with thunder but with calm, their voices like breezes through pines. You are not in their quarrels or their trials. You are beneath their sky, safe, resting, part of the story's circle. The Greeks believed myths endured because they told truths larger than fact, that love matters, that courage shines, that loss can be borne, that home waits. Tonight, as your breath deepens, those truths become soft companions. You are Demeter searching, Persephone returning, Orpheus singing, Heracles enduring, Theseus escaping, Jason sailing, Oedipus questioning, Antigone standing firm, Perseus reflecting, Achilles grieving, Odysseus longing, Agamemnon's house finding resolution, Prometheus enduring and gifting light. You are part of this constellation, your own life one more star in the pattern. And so the story closes, not with thunder or sorrow, but with rest. The loom of the fates hums softly. The fire of Prometheus glows gently. The sea of Odysseus laps calmly. The thread of Ariadne lies unbroken in your hand. The night sky above is filled with heroes, gods, and lovers, each shining, each patient. And you, beneath them, drift into the same timeless circle, carried toward peace. Sleep now. The myths will keep watch.